Good evening, everyone. I'm Marian Masone from the Film Society of Lincoln Center, and on behalf of the Film Society and the Museum of Modern Art, I want to welcome you this evening to New Directors, New Films, and to our screening. And I forgot to check how, because my Dutch is non-existent. Is it Die Welt? Die Welt. Oh, it's close. Anyway, but I'm sure you all knew that anyway. To our screening this evening of Die Welt, a wonderful debut feature film. And the filmmaker is here, so we're very happy about that. As I want to remind you all here, I'm bringing it here now to turn off all your electronic equipment, your phones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've been asking people to do so, but I think we've been having a lot of people not paying attention, so I want to make sure that we turn everything off so we can have a great screening. Anyway, so I also want to thank iFilms Netherlands, who've helped make Alex's travel here possible. I also want to thank them because they are always showing us the best in Dutch cinema, and that's where we find these wonderful films. So I want to thank them very much for that. We will be back afterwards for a Q&A. But right now, I'm very happy to introduce the director, Alex Pitstra. Alex.
Thanks, Marian, and thank you for the festival for having me here. This is my first time in New York, and it's amazing. It's an amazing experience. It's crazy to see how it just like this idea I had 2 years ago ended up, traveling like this and bringing me to this kind of places and being able to show you my film. Let me just tell you shortly how this all started, because I'm Dutch Tunisian. It means I was born in Holland from a Dutch mother, and my father came from Tunisia, and they met in Tunisia, and they were married for like 3 years, and then he went back to Tunisia. And I didn't see him for the rest of my life until I was 25. And I was starting to wonder, who's my father, basically? And he had the same questions at that time. And we kind of, contacted each other because we were out of touch. And then I went to Tunisia in 2005 for the first time. I saw him for the first time since I was like 4 years old or 3 years old. And that was an overwhelming experience to see this country, to have an entirely new family, which I hadn't had in my life. And I needed to, deal with this whole new situation, like a father, a family in Tunisia. And so I started going back to Tunisia every year. Since 2005, I visit them like once or twice a year. And I started collecting all these ideas. I started having all these observations about the country, and I started to feel the need to do something with that. And basically, that's what Die Welt has become. And Die Welt refers to the way my father looks to Europe. He says, Europa, Die Welt, I know it. That was the first thing he said about Europe when he spoke with me about it. And that indicated kind of, looking up to the continent, looking up to Europe. Die Welt, it's German actually, because he uses a mixture of languages, English, French, German, Dutch, and I speak with him in a mix of languages. And so, I don't know, what else? I think I should leave the rest for after the screening. There's just one thing. I mean, I made this film, but I couldn't have made it with the help of some very wonderful people who are also here. I would like to bring them up. First of all, my girlfriend and also producer of this film, Rosanne Breeman. Secondly, Renger Koning, who is the composer of the music in this film. And last is René Duursma, who is the editor. So, thank you very much. Once again, thank you, the festival. Thank you for being here. And I hope you enjoy the film. And I will be back afterwards to answer some questions. Thank you very much.
So we will be back. And don't forget to turn all those things off. This film is, they're called different things. I love these kinds of films that really are mixing sort of fiction and nonfiction, and not just in its telling you know, what might be a true story, because it's not. I think it's a story that's just taken. You got the idea. But there's some what looks like home movies. Are these real home movies of yours?
Yes, they are. These are material from my mother. She gave to me, and in the edit, when I was editing the story about at the hotel where my father was talking about his past, basically, because that's my father in the film, also playing my father, basically.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, what better way to show what he's talking about and this mental image than to use this footage? And I only found it this way of editing it in the post production. So it wasn't in the script, or I didn't think about it in front. So it kind of gave a way for me to incorporate my own story in this film without making it the main thing of the film. So it's behind it, and of course it suggests some history of this father and this person in Europe who he doesn't know, or he knows. And the film is kind of showing like a fictionalized version of myself, as if I were living in Holland or in Tunisia instead of in Holland. So it's like a thought experiment, but I wanted to link to myself. So yeah, that's true. It's real footage. Yeah.
So talk about the script or the writing of it. So your father plays Abdallah's father.
Yeah.
So he's father. Did you have a very clear script that you wrote, or did you do improvisation with some of your actors?
Yeah, I think we from the start, I think we had a basic treatment of the story, how it should happen, and what kind of elements I wanted in there. I mean, you can see a lot of small observations which aren't really narrative, thriving the narrative forwards. It's just more like interesting perspectives on life in Tunisia that I wanted to show. So I collected all of these elements, and I just created this structure together with my screenwriters, Thijs and Abdallah. So we started out with a basic structure, and that we filled in. So I think 50% of the film is improvised, and the rest is scripted. So there is a balance there, and of course the story, like the guy in the green room telling the story about his friend who went to Italy. We didn't script that. He was just sitting there telling this story. Of course. This was a really close collaboration also with Abdallah Rezgi, who was my cousin in Tunisia. And I met him when he was about, I think, 17. And I went there for 7 years and talked with him all the time about films and about Tunisia. And so we kind of, grew this idea of what kind of stuff should be in the film. And he wrote most of the dialogues in the film that were scripted. So he's like an experienced writer, just like me. I'm an experienced director, but I mean, it brings so much life to the film to have this, real Tunisian dialogues, and also having these people improvising their own stories. So I wanted to, give space in the film to people, bringing their own creativity, their own stories, and it's a mix. I try to balance this between to navigate between those two modes, so to speak.
Well, and it is when he does talk, and it's the camera's just on him, and he's telling his story. And had he, when you worked with him there, did you know that what he was going to tell you before you had an idea of what he was going to say, and then you let him go forward?
I mean, we talked with the actors, for example, this scene. But I must say, this was really, I explained to Abdallah, like, I want a scene that this guy tells about a guy he knows, we went to Italy. Because we did a lot of talking in front of the shooting, in the pre-production. And he just, talked with him and said, okay, listen, do you know a story? And then he said, yeah, I know this story about this guy who's called Ginger, and he went to Italy, and then he came back just to fill his passport with stamps. And basically, I just sat there and just watched it. I didn't understand what they were saying, but I totally trusted Abdallah in this, okay, so let him tell his story. And then it was 3 takes, and I felt it was right, and he felt it was right. And, directing in this way is really hard, because I'm like, depending on people around me, and also but in the end, you tend to trust on your like a physical almost intuitive way of thinking. Okay, I think this was right. Was it right? Yeah, it was right. So this is kind of how I went, and of course I try to bring the actors, to be relaxed and just be themselves. And I think that works good. Just casting people just playing themselves. I think that's like kind of a neo-realistic way of working, which worked for this project. I think for this film.
And were they all non-professionals?
No.
Or there are some that
there's a mix also there. For example, all the family members you see, that they are my family. So they are actually my cousins and the cousins from
and
France.
you're in there, right? You're the one they didn't know who they was. Yeah, I thought that was you. Okay.
Ironic joke there. But there's also a lot of actors, more professional, some less professional. But we did some castings, and we did a lot of family members I asked to perform in the film, because I felt that was the right way for this, for the authenticity of the film. I read a lot about Tarantino in the reviews here in the States. I think he inspired me. I like his way of the anecdote as a form, so to speak. So people telling a story to someone else. I really like this way of performing. There are many filmmakers, and I'm not really like a film buff saying like, oh, it's this and this comes from this and this comes from this. I like the films from Tony Gottlieb, for example. He makes films about gypsies, but also he made a film about Algerian youth going back to Algeria, finding their roots. So that kind of was an inspiration. I like Italian neorealism in the way they put non-professional actors in the story and place a story in a real situation, like this post-war Italy. And I think this post-revolutionary Tunisia was kind of the same situation in some way. But I also like real Hollywood directors like David Fincher or what have you. I tried with this film to combine two styles. Basically, one really obnoxious, maybe disobedient style that is like Tunisia is dynamic, organic, non-restrictive. It's just going, just flowing. And then I try to combine that with a more Hollywood kind of framing and tracking shots, and to give this dynamic also of indicating that there is this clash between Western lifestyle and more Tunisian traditional lifestyle that is clashing there. So. It's interesting because this is the first time in the festival people actually ask questions about cinematography of the film, which I really like because
we have very smart audiences.
Yeah. It's a shame that the DOP of the film couldn't be here now, because I owe him a lot of credits for his handheld camera work. We used an easy rig device, which is hanging the camera, so it's kind of in between Steadicam and handheld. And I like that because it gives the dynamics of handheld, but it controls it a little bit more in opposite to handheld work. So I think what we developed during shooting was a way of shooting one takes. That what started out as being one takes. So okay, we have this situation, we shoot it in one shot, and we find a I cannot say that word. Choreograph the movement, and it had to flow. So I wanted you as a viewer to be in the action, to be immersed in this action, and then it turned out in the edit that didn't work because the one take was having pauses and stuff that wasn't right for the rhythm. So I started cutting up all the different one takes I had, making jump cuts between one takes, but in one fluid movement. So this was kind of a discovery during the edit, and I think that works. And in some scenes you see this dynamic cutting, and I like it very much. And I felt that we needed a more counterpoint for this, for the audience also, to have more easy, more controlled shots, more resting points, basically, to create also create a dynamic, because it cannot be dynamic all the time. You have to have some counterpoint for that. The tracking shots were also creating some kind of anticipation. I mean, this is my first film. I haven't developed a complete cinematographical idiom yet, you know, so it's trying out different things. And I must say again that Thijs also, you know, he's an extremely talented director and filmmaker and camera operator, so I think I'm lucky to work with him in this film. And consider it different. Okay, there's two layers here. There's the question if why did you choose them to not make it to Europe? I like the idea that you never actually get to see Europe, but only their illusion of Europe. I think that's one of the points. The other point is it's based on I was inspired by a real story about this guy who went on this freight ship. And he went in there, he was waiting all night, and he thought he arrived in Europe, but then it appeared that he was still in Tunisia because the engine of the ship broke down. So that kind of gave me the inspiration. On a more personal level, if you're asking about, is it like mirroring your way? I think maybe, because I'm still in a process of finding out for myself, what do I want from Tunisia? What do I want from my father, from my family? What does he want from me? And this is still a process I'm really, you know, puzzling about. And I'm actually making a documentary about this subject, really about me and also about my sister from Switzerland, who's experiencing exactly the same questions. She went there last November for the first time in her life, and I went with her to film this. So this is like a follow-up project or like a companion, but it's more about me and about the real questions instead of hiding it in this film. So yeah, it's a good question. And I think in some way it mirrors, yeah.
I love the fact you're making a documentary too. So it's really, you know, all different ways of examining, you know, this kind of internal examination.
Like Fellini says, you know, creating or discovering or researching your identity in a creative dimension, and that's what I like. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good question. That's the first time somebody asked this.
I told
I'm
you, you're very
surprised
smart.
by this audience. This is really nice. No, I didn't make up the titles in front, but we started out with the treatment contained of 5 days, and they were separated by time in the story. So I wanted to have like this 5-day structure, and in the end, it ended up being 4 days because that felt better. Balanced or something. So I cut out some scenes, and then I left. I was, you know, kind of stuck with those 4 days, and I had to indicate that they were separate from each other, or there was some. I had to make pointers between them. So instead of just continuously making the edit flow on, I came up with the idea. So what should we do? Should we do like dates, like this is day like this, or this is August and this is September? Because there's, I mean, if you know a little bit about the history of 2 years ago, I mean, the summer was in July, and then you have the elections were in the fall. So I needed to create this time progression. And then at some point I came up with the titles, to do chapters actually, and then I needed to think of names for the chapters. So now your big question is, of course, what do the names mean, and how do they connect to each other? I think imperialism is, you know, kind of setting the situation as it is. You know, the lure of the West, the way of instilling ideas about the West in Tunisia. I think Casanovas is a way people respond to this. It's a way to get to this way, but that doesn't work in the film. And then something changes midway in the film. It's a revolution. I mean, you can say, okay, revolution. It's kind of an ironic way of saying nothing changes actually, because the film changes at that point. There's like exactly in the middle of the film, you have this shot of the city turning around, and that's a point that he loses his job. The film also changes from being more like a light and warm and compassionate, still becomes more dark and shifts slowly towards like this downbeat ending, and this harsh reality for Abdallah and his fellows. So the Revolution is about that. It's also about the politics and what happens now. You see people discussing democracy and what's next, and they're like children finding out what's democracy, and what did this revolution actually do. Is the third chapter, and the fourth chapter, Die Welt, which is the world in German. My father also says it in the film. It's basically the outcome. It's where they aspire to, and it's an illusion. So some kind of.
And where and you alluded to this briefly, the Arab Spring or the changes that were going on. Did this happen long before you shot the film, or you were in the middle of writing it? I mean, how did it affect the actual film you were going to make?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I was already planning to make a film in Tunisia. I wanted to make a film for us for several years. I mean, I visited my father in 2005, as I told before, for the first time. So I got to know the country in those first years. So I was already making films, and I was so inspired by everything I saw. So I started collecting ideas, and I came up with the storyline about a Dutch guy going to Tunisia, finding his father, and and then he has this brother or this, and it didn't work really, because I had to make up a story about myself, and I had to write a character who is myself, and that was really hard. And then at some point I found this idea to make a story from a perspective of a Tunisian guy, so placing this fictional character in my family in Tunisia. And that opened up a whole new way of possibilities. I based this character not only on myself or my idea of how a Tunisian guy would live, or how I would live in Tunisia, but also on my cousin, who is also the screenwriter in this film. Sorry, what was the question again? I lost it.
That's okay. I lose things too. About the Arab Spring and the changes and how that affected
what did the
film
revolution?
you were gonna make.
That script kind of lay there, and those ideas were just laying around, and it couldn't really finish it in the right way. Then January 2011, the revolution in Tunisia happened. That was the start of the Arab Spring, and that gave me the ending, because what I heard, what surprised me, was that there were thousands and thousands of young guys from Tunisia taking the boat to Italy after the dictator had gone. I was like, okay, your country is free now, where are you going? But they were like, okay, the border patrols are gone, now we can go, So it was this totally new way of thinking, or it was naive of me, I think, but I realized they don't even believe in their own country. They don't. They know it's not going to change anything for them. Just as my cousin says, I mean, freedom doesn't buy you a sandwich. So that gave me the idea for the ending of the boat, the boat escape. And it also gave me a lot of other ideas, and also the opportunity, because there was this vacuum in Tunisia, and there was this dictator that had gone. So I felt in some way more free to actually go in there. Yeah. So the revolution happened. That gave me some new ideas. In February 2011, 1 month after the revolution, we had the treatment ready. So it was a really boom, boom. And then we shot in July. So we had just 4 or 5 months of pre-production. That was hard. And I mean, I basically came from nowhere. So I had to find, first I had to find startup financing. So I was lucky enough to get some subsidies from a local art council here in my hometown in the Netherlands. And together also with Rosanne, who's also here, we started to do all these applications for a small funding. And we also did a crowdfunding campaign. Oh, okay. But it wasn't like Kickstarter making 100,000. It was just local and small. Mm-hmm. So it was just building layer on layer of getting money. So the Dutch embassy in Tunis gave some money, and I think it was just our enthusiasm about what we were trying to do that at some point brought some private investors, you know, starting to believe in the project, and they put in some more money, and then my mother gave me some money to make this film. So thank you, Mom. And then you know, Doha came in all the way in the end when we already had the rough cut, and it was really hard to get the money in time. So it was always stress, always, you know, already starting without really being sure that you have the money, and we had to do it really cheap. But of course, it went way over what we expected in France. So I was constantly spending money, and you know, my producers were like, "Oh my God, this is not gonna." And I said, "Oh, trust me, it's gonna work." I was like, straight to. So it was a hard process, and in the end, you know, the only way to get it back is to actually sell it. So we have a sales agent in Paris, and if we manage to sell it here in the States and in some other territories, I mean, we might get some money back. The total budget is in cash. What we really spent was about 170,000 euros. So it's like, I think, 190, $200,000, and then you have like 2 years of my work, which I didn't get paid for, and like the DOP didn't get paid, and one of the producers, more producers didn't get paid. So there is a lot of love in this film.
The glamorous life of filmmaking.
You're not gonna get rich.
Exactly. We're gonna have to call it quits because we have another film coming in. You know, we have a very smart audience, but you made a very smart film. Thank you very, very much.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Well,
thank you, all of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
for being here and your smart questions.